What's up, everyone? Welcome to Political Punks. I'm your host, Brett Smith. Let's welcome our guests. First up, retired U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret, defender of the faith, senior canine companion and rescuer, frequent guest on The Great Gutfeld Show, and host of Hollywood Weapons on the Outdoor Channel. America's real last action hero and genuine TV personality, Terry Schappert. Next, he is the creative manager, the content manager for Bongino Report, a New York Times and Amazon best-selling author of books like Debunk This, Spygate, and his new book, Dumb and Dumber, How Cuomo and de Blasio Ruined New York. And he and I hang on every word of Dr. Michael J. Burry's Twitter feed, and he always does his homework, Matt Palumbo. Next, she's an award-winning filmmaker, a USC grad. Her new film, The Plot Against the President, has garnered rave reviews and is a must-see. Her dad is, as the kids say today, kind of a big deal, and she's becoming one herself, Amanda Milius. And last but not least, she was the director of CPAC from 2006 to 2011, known and accepted widely as the salad days of CPAC. She also invited Trump to headline CPAC back in 2011. She's the author of multiple books, but best known for her hilarious book, The Social Justice Warrior Handbook, Lisa di Pasquale. Okay, welcome everyone. Let's talk about Gina Carano. Bring Me the Head of Gina Carano is the name of our block here. And we talked about this last time, and I said that Jon Favreau, as long as Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were there, they were going to protect her, that Jon is an old school Gen Xer, that all he cares about is what's best for the show. He cares about money and pleasing the fans. I was wrong. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have absolutely no power. They're probably lucky to have jobs. They probably have creative power, but this whole thing with Gina's Twitter feed transcended, obviously, creative power and the beloved character, that which is Cara Dune, which Gina is kind of tied to. I don't think, even though I think that they will recast, she brings all of her fan base into this show. So let's get everybody's thoughts on, this first Lucasfilm dropped that she was going to, basically they were no longer going to have anything to do with her. And this is after there's been a lot of talk about a Cara Dune series. Okay, there was so much excitement about this character that the spinoff was kind of like a no-brainer up until maybe about 3 weeks ago. Because Gina's Twitter feed, we talked about this too. I don't think it's outrageous. I didn't think it was right-wing. I don't think it was crazy. I thought it was kind of straight down the middle, common sense.
It's literally just anti-Nazi. Like, that's it. Like, it's not even like hard to like. There's not even like a fuzzy line here. Her Twitter, that statement that whatever she made that got her in all this trouble is like the way that the Nazis handled dividing a country is bad.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's kind of the most obvious point, but if you're going to start firing people for making Nazi comparisons, probably 95 out of 100 people getting fired will be on the left. It's really only now that all of a sudden it's inappropriate, and I think it is cringe to compare anything to Nazis. It's not, another genocide, but so what? I mean, if somebody if I were someone employing Gina, it's at worst something you have to talk about and go, hey, people could see this as offensive. But what she was saying was, at the core, was if you treat people differently because of their political views, it will make it easier to incite violence against them. And she's being dehumanized in a different way. That sort of proves her point.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably the only human being in the United States or maybe in the world who's never seen The Mandalorian, because I prefer.
I won't watch Star Wars shit.
Well, because I also prefer historical dramas like Lord of the Rings. So, actual historical dramas. And
Good
so,
for you, sir.
Yes, thanks, Amanda. But isn't it kind of ironic that this female anti-Semite is now working with Ben Shapiro, an Orthodox Jew, to create content? So, I mean, I think the big, I've heard a lot of the arguments of like, it's a company, they can fire whoever they want.
True. Free markets.
Yeah, sure. But I think if there's supposed to be some kind of a standard, then that standard was broken. I mean, all of her cast members, like the people who work for Disney, directors, producers, the stuff they say in social media is so over the top, and they're still working. Exactly. What kind of bums me out too is like, I'm a special forces guy. We're team people. Like, wouldn't it have been nice to have some of her cast members step up and go, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
This is bullshit, because she seems like a really nice gal. I knew her from her MMA because, you know, I like MMA stuff. So I knew her for that. But she seems like a very nice person, like a legitimate nice person. And I think it's crappy to see how cowardly the rest of the people who work with her are, because no one stepped up and said, this isn't right. You know, these other people have said all this other stuff. If we're going to do it that way, then no one should be working. So it's
her own castmates. One of them, I think it's Pedro Pascal. I might not be getting the name right, but he did the same thing where he compared the kids in cages policy to Nazism. He like posted a photo of a side by side with Nazi Germany, and it turns out the photo he posted wasn't even from America. It was from like, I think, Palestine in 2010 or something. But he still made that comparison. And I don't really think, if it wasn't this post, it would have been something else.
Palestine.
Palestine's not a fictional place.
Is that like something happening in Atlantis? Like, I didn't know that they had photos from mythical places.
I thought it was in the Bermuda Triangle. Isn't that near like Atlantis or something?
Right? So I think it borders Atlantis, but the point is, it would have been something else. Like there is a huge fan base of these films and shows that just hates conservatives, and you kind of see this with Chris Pratt, who's one of those people where we all know he's a conservative, but he won't say it out loud. But like every week on Twitter or every month, there's like a cancel Chris Pratt hashtag. He hasn't said anything offensive, but he follows Ben Shapiro, so we got to get him. And they're just going to look for any reason to cancel anyone who has any right wing views at all in Hollywood.
He talks about Jesus. I mean, that drives him nuts.
Also a cardinal sin.
Yeah, I mean, he's always tweeting the I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yeah. That's like his thing. You know, which is also the Norman Vincent Peale thing, which is Donald Trump's like favorite book in the world, which is
obviously radical, which is also radical and needs to be stamped out immediately. Something else that bothers me about this is that, and it's the same sort of thing that happened with the NFL. You know, I'm a football player. I played through high school and college, and the NFL has been destroyed for me. I did watch the Super Bowl because my brother came over and we had the obligatory that, but I guess what I'm saying is there's all this outrage about what they did to Carano. But you know what? Most of these people are still going to pay for it and watch Disney. So you're not the only way these people will ever actually learn is if you hurt them financially. And so if you stand for, I'm not telling you to boycott anything. Like I said, I've never even watched it, but it's kind of cracks me up how people are complaining about it and they're still paying for it. Right. Same way they complain about the NFL and they're still watching it. So shut up. If it really matters that much to you, then do something about it. And I'm all for the idea of not giving money and time and myself to people that spit in my face. But apparently people, you know, it's more important to be entertained than it is to say, hey, you know what? You're not going to get away with that.
Well, the other side of that, though, is also that people need to, if they're going to keep paying for shit that hates them, like if they're going to keep paying their cable bill, they're going to keep, putting Disney on for the kids, whatever, they need to pay for the content that they actually like. Like they need to be like, okay, I'm not going to like bootleg the latest conservative movie that came out. I'm going to actually rent it if it's available somewhere normal, or watch it where they want you to watch it for advertising purposes or whatever it is. Like our side is like so used to this thing where they're like, oh my God, we're being censored and the information is being pulled off the internet. It's hard to find. So I made this bootleg and I put it on whatever. Yeah. And you're like, no, you asshole.
You're right.
It's available in 10 million different places and beat the system, and you're screwing me. Like I can't tell you how many times I've had to argue with my own fans about they're like, Miss, just so you know, so that this can't be censored, I put Plot Against the President on, YouTube, and you're like, cool, because I beat Amazon at its own game, but I couldn't figure out how to put it on YouTube. Thank you, kind.
I remember when you guys got it on Amazon. I thought that was a feat, and I thought,
right?
I was like, that's victory right there. That's
a good point, though, Amanda. Yeah, you're right.
So it's like they got to pay for their own stuff. That's the way to send the message as well. I have to say, my public response to the Gina Ben Shapiro thing has to be, and I think all conservatives have to have this point of view, which is we have to support all conservative right-wing culture. I don't care what I think about folks that are at the Daily Wire. I like some of them. Some of them I've had bad run-ins with in the past who it doesn't matter. I have to say that I 110% support their decision to do that because the culture war is too important. And I applaud anything that comes out of that shop. And I applaud their decision to do that. However, there's also the I guess my own personal argument for conservatives, especially those that work in culture, is part of culture is having taste and style. And we cannot fall into the trap of just loving something because people that agree with us made it. Because that is exactly what happens. That's why we make bad shit. That's why every conservative movie is about abortion or Jesus and nobody wants to watch it. Right. And that is a problem. Like, you can't do that. We all have to support each other no matter what. I don't care. I'm going to applaud every abortion and Jesus movie that comes out. That's fine. And it's frankly good that they exist. There's not enough of them. So that's why I applaud it. But at the same time, there's got to be this higher standard that we hold ourselves to, where it's like, you can't just write a book about something and be like, oh, oops, it turns out I'm qualified to make movies about this because I decided I'm interested in it. Like, go ahead and do it, but maybe learn the craft as well. Like, make something worth, showing up Hollywood. Otherwise, we're not going to win.
We talked about this with Nick Searcy. I've talked about this with him offline too. I was like, how does this get fixed? And it's the same thing. You can have a conservative company, but the stuff's got to be good. It's got to be good. It's got to be creative, and it doesn't have to be conservative material. It just has to kick ass, and it would be great.
Yeah, and not be communist. Like, frankly, the bar is so low that you're just like, you could make a story about anything. Like, look at all the movies that were made in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. We're going to talk about Red Dawn, whatever. But like just even something like Die Hard. Like, Die Hard is not a political movie.
Exactly.
And you know what? It's good for America. It's you know what?
Yeah. And it was creatively cool, and it still holds up. And
absolutely,
the politics don't really matter. Yeah.
Well, that's what I've always said about Conan. I've always said, you don't walk out of Conan and be like, that's kind of a liberal guy. He's like, you don't think of like Alan Alda or something like that, or Phil Donahue when you walk out of Conan. That's a conservative film just because of the way the characters live their lives.
Yeah. It's about the ideology. Like, I tried when I was doing fiction films, which is what I always thought I would end up doing. I never thought I would do a documentary, to highlight the differences in lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like, independent, self-reliance. Like, if you teach those values in a more crafty way than just being like, here's Clint Eastwood as conservative man, and here's bad people. Like, There's
got to be more ambiguity there, because what conservatives need to understand better about storytelling is that most people like to come to conclusions on their own, or at least think that they have. And you can do that through the beats of a story. You can bring people to conclusions. We can have our messages and our ethos, and we can reflect that which is good and exceptional about America and Western civilization within the story. You can imbue all that into the story, and you bring people to the conclusion on their own through the story, through the characters.
And that's how you win people from the other side too, is I actually back when you and I first met on my thesis film from college.
That was The Lotus Gun, which is a fantastic film. And I wasn't sure, it's one of those things where I'm not sure if I should bring that up, because it's your student film.
It's a glorified homework assignment, but
it was really good. Okay. Visually it was beautiful.
The thing that came out of that I will say I do think was on point was I got all the lesbian and feminist magazines to write about it and say that it was amazing, and they have no idea that it's like a libertarian, thinly veiled NRA ad.
Yeah,
they're literally like, they're just like, this is against misogyny, and you're like, okay, and how does the chick like win against misogyny? Oh, she digs up a gun and blows everybody away. Cool. Like, now that we've accepted this, like, go ahead. Like, you can only do that once or twice, but it's worth doing.
Well, and the female character, I think, was growing her own buds, and then the sort of the nefarious characters were opiates and heroin, as I recall, or something like harder drugs.
Yeah, they had like slave girls, and they didn't like it was like
and it was it was also a commune that
There's communism versus independent Western living.
Yeah, the protagonist was kind of a Jeremiah Johnson, sort of out on her own.
That's being really generous.
It is.
Comparing my student film to Jeremiah Johnson.
Just kind of the position of the character in the film was sort of a mountain woman. She was on her own. It was just her and this other chick. But either way, it's kind of one of those things where, you look back at your stuff that you did in college and you're kind of, some of it's kind of cringe. But at the same time, when you were on the film tour and you were winning awards for that, I remember you telling me, you're like, all these people don't get it. They all think they just see the pot and the
naked girls and the weed, and they're like, "This is an amazing movie." And
right.
You're like,
apparently, I need to see this film now.
I know we're talking about it too much. It's going to become like a thing.
But to your point, though, Brett, and also Amanda, I think the big point is when it creatively and story wise sneaks up on you, and you're going, when you feel like you're being lectured. That's when it fails, whether it's left or right. Like when I see a movie or a TV show, and this is what happened to me when I was watching The Boys. So I was watching a while back that first season of The Boys, and there was definitely some left stuff, and it was like mocking Christian. I got it. I was like, okay, I can tolerate some of that. It's okay because it was such an interesting idea, and it was crazy with the shit they were doing. But I actually, after I think the second episode in season 2, I just broke away because I was like, now they're lecturing me and they're putting it in my face. And I think that's when you lose creativity, right?
It kills the suspension of disbelief. You're inside the movie and you're inside the story. And the last thing you want to have happen is pull you out because something, it's something in the story or something in special effects. If it pulls you out,
you're done.
Then it's not working, and then you've killed the suspension of disbelief, and now you're thinking outside the film, and you're not engaged.
There was a scene when they pulled over this dude who was driving on a road, and they're like, "Give us your car," and he was like, "No," and he pulls a gun on them, and they end up killing him. And of course, the girl's like, "All that idiot had to do was give us the car," like these dumb gun people. And I was like, I'm done with you.
Yeah, that was the scene.
I walked away from the show after that. I was like, fuck you. I don't see this anymore.
That was a comic book series from the 90s from Garth Ennis. It's deconstructing superheroes, which is not my favorite thing in the world, because it kind of, that's sort of the whole point of superheroes is that they're these mythological characters. They're demigods basically. So to deconstruct them, it's kind of like, doesn't really, but Watchmen made that very popular in the 80s, and then everybody had to do that after that. They all had to copy Alan Moore. But the Boys, I never read it. I thought the first season was well done. The Christian concert thing gave me pause, and then I pushed forward because
exactly the same.
Because they were kind of like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker kind of thing.
Right. They were not likable anyway, and they were full of shit. So you're able to that's okay. Right.
Right. And then the black guy was he's like, hey, I'm Episcopalian, man. He was kind of defending faith, and I like that. I like the fact that there's all different sides. Second season, I had the same problem, and it was that scene.
As soon as I was blatantly being lectured by people looking down their nose at me, then I'm just not interested in it, even if it's cool special effects and all. No, I just walked away. And I think that's to your guys' point about making content. If you're going to stick it in someone's face and lecture them, you've actually abdicated creativity. That's
what I'm worried about with this Gina Daily Wire thing, is that she is like an ex-MMA person, and that the allure of the strong female character, which is so poorly named because usually it just means like a really annoying female character doing kung fu.
I get what you mean.
It could go so bad. Like
you said, we'll get like you said, Amanda. We're giving them the chance.
We have to applaud it. And that's the other thing. You know what? Shame on any conservative director that doesn't come out and applaud it. Like, where the fuck is Dinesh D'Souza on this? Where is he coming out and being like, yeah, good for you. Let me help promote other people. Let me help push. The country is at stake. Imagine a world without America. But then if you're actually another conservative filmmaker, like where is this dude helping like promote people? I've had a movie out for a year, and I'm like, Lauren Southern makes a movie. I'm tweeting it out. I'm like, donate. John and the guys that did Hoaxed, I'm promoting their stuff all the time. I will promote Jack Posovic's anything he does. Like, I don't even, like, I will absolutely support every single other conservative filmmaker that I ever come across, no matter what I am, even if I have differences in style or anything like that. Like, I pushed, I even promote and support Trump Card as well, because I think it's better that people see it than they don't. How is it so hard? Our side is always at each other's throats.
Yeah.
And one of the most like shocking things that I found when I was promoting this, like, that's one of the reasons we're not going to win the culture war, is because, like, for example, there were a handful of folks on Fox News that wouldn't cover Plot Against the President on just because they had decided that they had written a book about Russiagate and they thought that Lee Smith was competition. And so they're like, yeah, we're not going to cover that. And you're like,
really?
That's so Fox nowadays, though. No, yeah, that's just the way it is. Like, everybody there who has a show is basically there, to promote their show and their book,
Yeah.
And then they have their other friends from other shows come on their shows, and it's just this musical chairs of bullshit, and you never get anything cutting edge.
I don't want to monopolize, but there's this. It's just, you guys just made me think of something. Green Berets, we're very tribal. And it's funny because, like, if you're in 5th Special Forces, I was in 10th group and 19th group, you'll talk shit about the other groups, but if you go to war with them, you'll kill for them and you'll die for them. And I think people are saying, a lot of these conservative intellectuals are like, they're the cool kids in the back with the leather jackets that are like, tribalism's bullshit. Actually, tribalism conquered the world. And the side we're fighting against, the left, is a very big, very united tribe.
Well, they're super organized,
Right. But they are tribal, and they will put aside their differences to crush us. Our side spends a lot of time, just like you said, Amanda, going, well, no, he's a competitor, or, that guy's kind of a jerk. Yeah, the movie's cool, but why am I going to promote his? Because I have one of mine coming out. And so I think the embrace of tribalism, I'm one of those guys that's like, you should probably join a tribe, because if you don't join a tribe, you're one of the little individuals that's going to get run over and eaten by a tribe that comes and takes what you have. That's humanity. That's anthropology. And we can deny that and be the cool kids and go, I'm by myself. Yeah, sure. Okay. Here they come for you.
Yeah.
There's 75 million people that are in a tribe, and, a lot of them are all moving to places where to be amongst their people. To turn red areas more red and to keep them red. There's the balkanization going on. Jesse Kelly calls it a national divorce. It's happening before our eyes. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's perfectly natural. I think it's human nature. But this is what the left does. They're so organized and so good because they are the hive mind. So it's like one will tweet out, the other's album or the other's piece of art or their content. This is so awesome. You got to see this, you got to buy it, and you got to follow this person. And then the other person reciprocates, and they do the same thing. And it's this whole quid pro quo. Why we don't do that? Because there's tons of us who are talented. We have amazing content. Matt, I sent an email to Seb Gorka. I said, you got to interview him. I said, this is a great book. Why aren't you on Seb? I'm gonna help make that happen. Lisa's, God, how many interviews and people have you put me in touch with? Larry O'Connor, all kinds of people, all of them, exactly.
All of them.
I actually did
all of the above.
You were working as a waitress at a cocktail bar when she met you.
That's right. That's right.
No, I've gotten a lot of.
Well, one thing I will say is, I do think that in general, you're right about the competition and people not supporting others. But one thing in defense, I guess, of speaking out for others on our side is I think a lot of people are hesitant because at some point they think they're gonna be called to have to answer for every crazy thing that person has ever said.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yep.
You're right. Because then you're tied to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally true. That's actually the one. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's a struggle I have. Where like, I don't want to play by the left's rules, but I also don't want like people to Google me and be like, yeah, he was on a show with a guy who's friends with a guy who's friends with a guy who's a Nazi. Like,
it's a good thing about creating culture. And I think the one thing that can take down, the blacklisting, and that is there's no blacklist if there's more than one place to go. Yeah. So if Gina is successful at Daily Wire or, who knows, whatever she ends up doing, I think it does, free up the market so that people can go other places, and gives, the one central place more power, because there's not even enough conservatives. I mean, there's not even enough in this chat that would support something overtly conservative for entertainment value. So it's not just appealing to conservatives. There's not enough conservatives that just want to see conservative.
Right. Yeah.
Which is why you got to make stuff for everybody. You have to make stuff that's largely for the lowest common denominator. I look at the movies of the 80s and the early 90s, largely crafted for the widest swath audience possible. Everybody wanted to get meat in the seats. And that's, it was all about having a big, not just having a big box office weekend, but you got to remember in the 80s and the 90s, movies were in the theater for sometimes a year if they were really successful. And I'm talking maybe 6 months at the regular theater, and then they go to a dollar theater later on. Because we were talking about Rambo 3. I saw Rambo 3 in a dollar theater because I missed it after, when it was in the regular theaters for some reason.
Do you think that's gone forever, that kind of stuff, guys? That sort of that model where like the theater had that. You're right, man. You're making me laugh because there were movies that were around for months, and I was like, oh, man, I never saw that. I'd duck in and see it. Do you think that's going to happen again?
Well, they were churning out probably a lot less stuff, right? So,
in the 80s and the 90s, they were doing a ton of stuff.
There was budget size. So the thing like in the 80s and 90s that was so special is your 20 million to 70 million range, which is where you get movies that can be popular in America alone and succeed. So then you had culturally targeted movies. So movies, again, like even like your Die Hards, your Rambos, your big blockbuster movies, they could live and die off of American audiences. When you get into what they're doing now, which is absolutely, there are no more movies in that range. They all have to be independent, which means they will be on the lower range of the closer to 20 million than the 70. But when you get into these $200 million movies, which is all they do now, it requires a global audience, which requires a storyline that is so dumbed down and not
interesting. Yeah.
It has to be like man chased by monster. And you can understand that in South America. You can understand that in China. You can understand that anywhere. And so that's why all these stupid movies, like, I mean, they're just so bad for the culture because they're all this globalist, bland, cultureless stories, whereas like you have to kind of be American to get all of the edges of certain movies that were made in the 80s and 90s that were just those kind of movies that we all love, that really like speak to us. They speak. That's a really good point.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I never thought of that. That's cool. Yeah.
The two guys I always point to in the 80s as probably the most Americana is your dad, John Milius, and John Hughes. Those guys kind of captured sort of this zeitgeist of Americana in the 80s and what that was.
Absolutely.
And
high school culture, you have to be American to get that. I mean, granted, you could probably watch it in Europe and like you can love it, but there is something so down home about home small town America, middle town America, about those movies.
Well, and then what did the two Johns, Hughes and Milius, usually do in their stories? And this even extends to guys like Harold Ramis, Joe Dante. They all questioned authority, whether it's Animal House or the Blues Brothers. John Nolte just did a great review on Breitbart of the Blues Brothers. He calls it problematic. It's like, I mean, that's what's so great about it. It's hilarious. But
so
these guys.
Spirit.
Well, and all these guys, all the guys that came out of the National Lampoon, Doug Kenny, Henry Beard, Michael O'Donoghue, John Belushi, all the guys from SNL, they were all Lampoon people originally. And then they were stolen away by this guy, Lorne Michaels, from Matty Simmons and the Lampoon. Those guys all taught us humor. And so much of their humor was about questioning authority and challenging the man. And we talked about Caddyshack last time, how Trump is Al Chervik in Caddyshack. Totally. Going into Bushwood Country Club, which is the GOP, and just turning it upside down. And, the idea was he'll never be a member. They'll never let him be a member, but maybe he'll buy the club, which just infuriates them even more. But, something else that's really troubling about this Gina thing, I got to bring this up, is, and this happened this week, Hasbro canceled, and I have never seen this before, okay? and I don't think it's a Hasbro decision. I think it's a Disney Lucasfilm decision. They made Hasbro do this. Hasbro killed all of the Gina Carano toy lines, the action figures, the T-shirts, the posters, because I'm sitting here thinking after she gets fired, I'm like, well, you know what? She's set for life. She's going to make money off the residuals. She's probably got maybe a point or a share.
They don't really do that anymore.
They don't. Yeah, the points are hard to get these days.
Not a thing really anymore.
But I'm sitting here thinking, okay, she signed her likeness over, which is what you do when you enter into one of these. When you're Henry Cavill or you're Ben Affleck or you're Daniel Craig, you sign these. They're like these slavery contracts. They used to call them that, actually, and they're for like 7 to 10 years. You sign your life over to be Superman or to be Wonder Woman, and they own your likeness. They can put it on anything. You probably get a cut of that. So I was thinking, Gina's set up pretty well because she's going to make money off Star Wars. And then they're like, nope, no merch for you. You're not going to make any money. And then I'm starting to think, okay, they're going to recast her. Let's say they recast her at the end of the next season. She walks in. That's like the cliffhanger or something like that.
Will be black now.
Or it'll be Brie Larson or something, right? Who's been on weight gainers or something. But like, what would stop them from going into seasons 1 and 2 and doing like a deep fake over her face with the new actor? I mean, this is the kind of retconning.
It is the future, unfortunately.
Yeah. This is what communists do.
They erase you. They erase you.
And they're disappearing her toy lines so she can't make any money off of them.
Disappearing her toy line is if they care so much about little girls seeing, like, they give such a shit about this idea that little girls are playing with tough toys. Like any girl wants like a really muscular Barbie. Like anyone wants that. But it shows you that on the Olympics of wokeness, strong women and like supporting women and like having good role models for girls is lower on the list than being anything at all close to right wing. I mean, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Matt, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I think there was a case where, and this is obviously much more justified, where like after all the Kevin Spacey stuff came out, there was a movie he was doing, and
with Ridley Scott, yeah.
He redid the entire film and then like digitally edited him out. So it is possible. Was my point with that? But
didn't they bring in like Chris Plummer or something?
Yeah,
something like that, but it's obviously a different context.
The Getty movie.
Yeah, the Getty movie. That's right. They had the whole thing done, and then Ridley went back in and just said, it's not worth dealing with this shit. I'm just gonna. And I think it hurt the film to a large degree because it killed the promotion and the timing and everything. People and then again I was like, that's one of those projects where I look at Ridley and I'm like, that's not what people want from you, dude.
Nobody wants that. I would have rather watched the Kevin Spacey thing. Like Kevin Spacey is amazing. I'd watch him in anything. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Ridley needs to maybe do a Star Wars movie. Like that would be awesome. But Disney would never allow that.
The last thing I'll say on the Disney thing, and I swear I'll stop like mouthing off constantly, but this is the Hollywood portion, so I feel like I'm. This is the last thing I'll be.
You're an expert.
No, it's out the window after this. But weirdly. Okay, so you know who runs Disney and Lucasfilm, who's the helm of that is Kathleen Kennedy.
That's your pop's buddy for a long time.
Yeah, so her first job in Hollywood was as my dad's secretary.
Really?
And she's very nice. She still speaks about him very kindly, even though he's conservative. I mean, this was, I don't know, at least I could say that back 10 years ago, whenever they did that documentary on him. Mm-hmm. She was really great in it, but you kind of want to be like, seriously, you're going to cancel people from your own content that are saying something about 1 million times more mild than what you heard my dad say in The Office. That didn't bother you then because you were on your way up, right? You were working for Hollywood people. You wanted, then she got the job with Spielberg, then she got in with Lucas and all this. And you're like, okay, so things are only offensive, obviously, in the context of the time that we're in right now.
Exactly.
But it's just gross.
And that's it. And it just speaks to what a weak culture we have become. I mean, the Gen Xers can handle this stuff, and even Jack Posobiec calls the '80s babies the Centennials. Because obviously he doesn't want to get lumped in with the Millennials. I mean, who would? Matt, what are you, a Gen Z or a Gen Y? Where?
I identify as whatever is the right answer.
Well, you're
I'm legally speaking a millennial. Yes.
You fit in nicely with Gen X. So and that's
cut off. I actually don't know the exact year. So
early
1980.
93.
Yeah, you're way off.
Yeah.
I missed being a boomer by a year, not even a year.
Yeah, you're on the cusp.
So my credit, Gen Z is way worse already. So
you know, people always say to me, they're like, Gen Z, they're the most conservative generation since the World War II generation. I'm like, do you know anybody from the World War II generation? I mean, those are my grandparents.
70-30 against Trump. There's no,
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, so Gen Z, so they grew up during a depression with 20% unemployment, and then had to go and save the world from fascism. Right. That's the same generation, and that's what made them so conservative. Give me a break. They're soft. So. Anyway, well, the Hasbro thing, I've never seen that before. Just from the standpoint of they're cutting off a revenue stream, obviously, that would be very lucrative. And then the funny thing about this, though, is I used to work in a comic book shop when I was like 12, 13, child labor, Gen X, and so my buddy was also a collector, so he was always on the lookout for what's going to be hot in 5 or 10 years, He-Man, Transformers, Pokemon. He was one of the first guys to bring Pokemon to Arizona because he went to Japan and brought it back because he knew it was going to be huge. So we were texting the other day, and he said, this Gina Carano shit is going to be the hottest shit. He said, if you can get your hands on anything right now, whether it's on Walmart, eBay, buy it. Buy the figures, buy the T-shirts, do what you can. He said, don't go crazy, but he said, there's going to be a finite amount of this stuff now because they've cut off everything. So the Funko Pops are gone. Everything has been cleaned out. You can't get anything on Amazon. Yeah, there you go, Matt.
Next big investment.
So Lisa bought some stuff. I bought some stuff. And then the other thing to look for, this is the other thing that Neil told me, was look for things that have Gina's face on it and the figure, but don't have the branding of the Mandalorian, because that's the stuff that they were setting up for a Cara Dune spinoff. So they were going to announce that up until I think about, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I've been watching her Twitter feed quite a bit. And she got a little, in the last couple days before she got canned, she was getting a little salty. She was she did this word puzzle that said Epstein didn't kill himself. And I think she knew that the hammer was coming down. So it's just like, fuck it. What are you going to do? But
that's how I was with CPAC 2011. And I was like, you know what? Just let Donald Trump speak.
Because
sure it'll be fine. Everyone will forget about it.
Did you have any clue that was going to be basically a deal breaker at all?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that I was probably on my way out, and Trump was so last minute that they couldn't stop it. But because it was at the invitation of Chris Barron and the gays, which is the reason that I got fired, that was like the nail in my coffin.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that now, considering that obviously Matt is very one of the most pro-Trump people? How do you feel? And that CPAC has become so Trumpian. It is one of the last, compared to the RNC, CPAC as far as an organization is very pro-Trump.
Yeah, I mean, CPAC in general has always followed the grassroots. And so obviously it was a bumpy road to get there. I mean, there was one year, I think they basically, I don't know if which it was like one of those, I don't break up with you, or you can't break up with me, I break up with you, or, whatever, where Trump said he wasn't sure if he could come, and then he was uninvited, or the other one, like 2012 or 2013 or something like that. And, I think they probably got the message from grassroots, not to say anything about Schlapp or anything. He actually, and to be clear, he was only on the board when I was there. And from what I heard, he did vote to keep me.
But he's really based. I never, I had the, obviously I knew him in and out of working in Washington, D.C. in the administration and stuff. And I worked a little bit at my time at the White House, crossed over with Mercy in communications. But I hung out with him a lot in Nevada during, after the election, like during the election fight, when all the bad guys basically just went home, like all the RNC shills who were getting paid left all the states and just were like chilling at their houses. And he was a fighter. I mean, I literally said to him at a bar one time, we were all out taking all the kids, the appointees that had come out to volunteer their time. We were all out at this dive bar in Vegas, and he's sitting there with like a giant martini that's like glowing, which is just like a funny, like you got Matt Schlapp with like this purple martini. And I was like, dude, I got to tell you, I thought you were really establishment. Like, I have to apologize. Like this whole time, I thought you were like kind of like really cucked. And he was like, why do people keep saying that to me? Like everyone says that. I was like,
because you worked for the Koch brothers for 20 years.
I know. And he's actually, his politics are so good and he's so willing to fight. And he's just like, yeah, we got to get in there. We got to get him. And you're like, God, this guy's cool. I had no idea. He's so cool.
Hey, people can change, and we saw a lot of that under Trump. I mean,
people also can change whether it's legit or not legit based on reading the room, and that's fine. I mean, we take converts, and some of our best people are converts. So
absolutely, that's actually true, and I'm fine with that.